I think one of Cage's best properties is how he keeps his doubts to himself. Sometimes, as a leader, for the sake of clarity, but especially for the sake of relief, sometimes it can feel like a great asset to share the burden. But this only estranges and confuses subordinates and should probably be avoided. Cage always stays cool no matter what, and he's always ready to cut his losses, which I would like to think that I'm also of a similar caliber, at least the second one. It reduces the amount of chaos. Indeed, Lieutenant Cage. Something worse, even the Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster? I whispered the title, my skin crawling in recollection. Sister Superior Eladia arrives with Sergeant Uhak. Her armor is rent from the middle of the breastplate to her left shoulder, blood stained down her side. There are bolt impact scars across the silver, pits of gray and white in the metal enamel. She has removed her helm, revealing a slender, pale face framed over the ears by hair dyed red, the outline of a red skull tattooed around her features. She stops a few paces away, keeping her distance from the Space Marine Psyker, expression tense. The Abbey has been secured, Brother Librarian. There is no reason to delay your departure. There is a cause to remain a while longer, but I do not harbor any fears that our presence will interfere here. It is an alliance that I wish to proceed. Are we not all warriors of the Imperium here? You are, Erasmia says sternly. She looks at the ruined gate. I am not, but I can see that our abbey is no longer secure. We will not abandon our duties, Eladia says harshly. The Order of the Argent Shroud remains true to its oaths of protection. Now more than ever, we must resist the darkness, as do the Salamanders, says Uhak. Do not judge the commanders of the Astra Militarum too harshly, Sister Superior. Several companies of the World Eaters threaten breakthrough south of here. If not for the withdrawal of the fresh lines, their army would storm out of Acheron pocket. It is not grand strategy that we seek, says Athahiva. A more arcane purpose guides everything that passes on Armageddon these last few days, and I think your sisters will be pivotal in helping us thwart the World Eaters and their diabolic intent. How so? Says the Colonel. If there is anything I can do to aid your efforts, you have my word, I will provide it. I recognize that look in his eye. Purpose. Excitement, even? Here it comes, I think. Another last chance. Our little conclave breaks up while measures are taken to bolster the defenses of the Battle Abbey. One of the rhinos is brought out to stand across the ruined gateway. Not much of a barrier, but better than nothing. Sisters of Battle stand at the walls and towers while the Space Marines patrol outside, checking the rubble of the other Barbican for survivors and ensuring that there are no more World Eaters nearby. The gunship rises to provide cover overhead, its shadow occasionally passing over the gray walls and blood-stained courtyards as it circles, the roar of engines closing, then receding with it. Cage! I turn at the colonel's shout. Erasmia, Eladia, the old preacher, and Schaefer are standing by the doorway, leading up to the chapel. He lifts a hand to beckon me over. As I make my way across the cloister, heavy footfalls catch up from behind. Afahiva and Uhak passing me with long strides. The librarian has hung up his helm also, revealing coal black features, younger than I would have thought. A livid, pale scar cuts him from the bridge of his nose down both cheeks. Deliberate, not a battle wound, which is impressive, given I've heard that Space Marines usually heal as good as new. A mark of honor, he says, voice deep and resonant, even without the suit's address system. I realize I'm staring. There are metallic cables set into his bald scalp, connected inside the collar of his armor. A golden nimbus plays along the wires now and then. He reaches out with a finger and traces it around my face without touching. Remember, the teaching. The Emperor will not judge you by your medals and diplomas, but by your scars. You have honor too. Why is he here? Erasmia demands, her scorn directed at me. This is no discussion for criminals. Attend your own sin first, sister, Preacher says sharply. Kage risked his own life on that wall when I did not. Which of us is more proper to attend the war council? Erasmia gives him a look and suggests that perhaps the priest shouldn't be attending either. But she says nothing as she turns towards the great doors leading to the chapel tower. The Space Marines duck behind the lintel as they follow, the stairwell within soon filled with their bulk and the noises of their armor. Alfahiva's staff thuds on the steps every few seconds, each impact like a tomb slamming shut. Eladia motions for us to follow, and I climb up the steps beside the colonel, returning to the chamber where I discovered I might be a living saint. I definitely don't feel like a saint beneath the unliving gazes of the tapestries and statues within. But then why not? There have been saints from the Imperial Guard, like Machirius and Vesta, all the way back to Oleanus Pius himself. First and greatest. I mean, dress me up in some gold uniform and wave a big flag behind me, and maybe I would start to shape up a bit better against the images depicted in the hangings around us. I joined as the sisters and priest bow before the altar, making the sign of the Aquila across my chest. The colonel dips his head in respect. The Space Marines watch us with silent patience. May I say a few words? Says old preacher. If you must, replies Erasmia. We do not have the time to indulge in the luxury of prayers, interrupts Uhak. The threat escalates while we delay. The priest looks up, but does not complain, withdrawing behind the altar with arms crossed. As I spoke, before, the attacks of the World Eaters are not random violence, but part of a carefully choreographed campaign of destruction. Alfahiva tells us. I believe that they came here to desecrate this abbey, to turn the faith imbued in the stones to a darker purpose. And I thought they had been thwarted. But I was wrong. We cannot remain here to protect this place. We hold until we are dead, says Erasmia. She glances at Eladia. If the Emperor wills it. It is not enough to defend ourselves against these attacks, the librarian continues. The slaughter of your sisters is the desecration. Your blood is the unholy anointment of their ceremony. We need to take the battle to the world eaters, says the colonel, with more relish than such a suggestion really deserves. An assault to disrupt the ritual at its source. That is our thinking, says Alfahiva, smiling grimly. And it is the intent of my fellow brothers of the Librarius. There is no physical victory that can be won here. This is a war of the soul, but every drop of blood spilled by this side strengthens. He falls silent, exchanging a guarded look at his sergeant. The enemy ritual depends on bloodshed, Uhak finishes. All bloodshed. That is all you need to know. Need to know. I remember the conversation with Orskia and think about what might have happened on Armageddon before. The eaters of worlds, she mentioned. Stories of blood. This isn't the first time. The thought of it, the ruthlessness to let a whole planetary population to die to keep a secret. And what happens this time? Nobody needs to know. I keep my mouth shut, even though I want to ask all the obvious questions. No need to remind our fine company that lower beings like me aren't meant to talk about Warpborn. It explains the hesitation by everyone, nobody wanting to mention by name the thing that everyone has on their minds. How do you stop them? I ask instead. There's got to be a way of disrupting the ritual. Apart from not letting them kill anybody, I mean. The rift above the world is the opening through which their power flows, explains Abahiva. Not just the heretics drawn down this energy to fuel their ceremonies, and in turn, their ceremonies widen the breach so that more immaterial force pours into our reality. We we have isolated a few significant sites where the world eaters are concentrating their efforts, says the sergeant. Acheron is one of the most active, but there are others across the continent of Armageddon, Secundus, and elsewhere. Alpahiva draws his staff through the air, leaving a mist of gold in its wake. A wavering image of a world appears, showing the land masses of the planet, pin pricks in 8 different places growing brighter. My mind plays tricks as I look at them, somehow imagining them to be the outline of a geometric skull. Though when I blink and look again, they don't seem to make the shape at all. If we can disrupt the ritual at enough of these locations, says Apahiva, the spiritual links between them will be broken, and the physical connection to the rift severed. Or perhaps break the link entirely at one site, if that is possible, says Uhak. That should begin a chain reaction that disrupts the entire ritual network. The image shimmers into dust and then disappears. So, where do we attack? Asks the colonel. The librarians and forces drawn from the entirety of our chapter are preparing to make strikes in the next 2 days, says the librarian. Our arrival here is a diversion from the objective, where I have been assigned. Sister Aladia and her companions should be a welcome addition to our force. The Sister Superior nods, still not looking too comfortable with the whole idea. The plan has much merit, but we cannot simply leave the Abbey. There are sisters from other orders here, lay adherents of the ecclesiarchy we have to protect. Oh. Gav, thanks, Gav. The plan has much merit, but we cannot simply leave the Abbey. There are sisters from other orders here, lay adherents of the ecclesiarchy we have to protect. Yes, yes, the brother librarian and I have discussed that, says Sergeant Uhak. His gaze moves to the colonel and then to me. We believe we have a solution that will suit the capabilities of everyone assembled here. Sergeant Uhak. There he is throwing the mighty fragmentation grenade. I think that's Colonel Schaefer. I don't know who. I think that's just a guy. That could be Ohebs, maybe, perhaps. Ohebs is pretty nondescript, but I think Ohebs is also ugly. That's gotta be Colonel Schaefer, because I don't think that's Lieutenant Cage. The frag grenade's an excellent weapon. Only one man in a squad can throw it though, so if you have a squad of 50, that's like 4 grenades not being thrown, I believe. Maybe things were different. Maybe things are different now. But the frag grenade had the special. The most unique thing about the frag grenade, I think it was like the smallest, most available. Well, yeah, it wasn't the weakest, but it was the most available weapon that could be thrown and dispensing a small blast template. So one little man this big could make a blast like this fucking big. I also liked it because it was something that most people forgot to use. So I felt really, really smart using it. It always felt like the Astartes frag grenade should do 4 damage, but I think the Astartes frag grenade also did 3. I mean, strength. Yeah, I dare say the Astartes frag grenade had 3 strength, but it was their shotgun. Yeah, it was the shotgun that the damage was better. Though the Space Marines still throw the same kind of frag grenade. It's just in a cooler, like, belt dispenser. Or at least that's how it was in Ultramarines. The Sister Superior lowers to one knee to receive benediction, head lowered. As old preacher finishes, Eladia stands and prefers her bolt gun. The priest wraps the lengths of beads about its muzzle and says some words in High Gothic. If I recall correctly, he says, holding the beads up to the gun, you are required to provide a bodyguard to all members of the clergy. You will be safe, says the Sister Superior. That is not what I said. I am due an appropriate bodyguard, led by a Sister Superior. I insist you provide it. It will weaken my force to leave the Battle Sisters at the Abbey. I insist. This is a holy ground of the ecclesiarchy. It is still manned by your sisters. They have protection. Your oaths, Sister Superior, are binding. Eladia stares at him for several seconds, fingers flexing around the grip of her bolter. The Sister Superior turns her attention to Erasmia. Canoness, what do our articles of faith say is appropriate guard for a preacher? 1 sister, I believe, Eladia. 1 battle sister for a preacher of the 2nd order. Ridiculous! Snorts Dynamite. Dinium Inimalis. Ridiculous! Snorts Dinium Inimalis. How much protection can 1 sister provide me? No. You should keep your command here, Sister Ladia. 1 sister, Canoness? Says the battle sister. Her gaze returns to old preacher. I will stand as guard for you. The rumble of the vehicle engines grows louder as they start to pull out. No, no, says the priest. Recall them immediately. This is impiety. To ignore my bidding. Each vehicle passes out through the gate, along the cratered remains of the metal road, tracks grinding through broken pieces of armor, where spiked prows push through the scattered remains of immolators and the drop pods destroyed by Space Marine melta-bombs about an hour earlier. I watched them for a few hundred meters, until oily smoke and dust obscures the column from view. The cloister is now home only to a few dozen wasters, hivers, and ancillary abbey staff, save for those wounded and those ones tending them below. I turn to my other companions, and then meet the gaze of the colonel with a sigh. That's it then. Anyone got some dice? It's been nearly an hour since the Battle Sisters left us to protect the Abbey and refugees. We've got sentries on the towers and walls, a mix of hivers and wasters, while Canoness Erasmia and Eladia conduct an inspection of the supply situation. With the Battle Sisters gone, there's plenty of room in the former dormitories, so everyone else is making good with bedrolls, blankets, and whatever they brought with them. The corpses were moved before the expedition force left. Honored dead have been placed in tomb cells below the abbey, while the remains of the traitors are burning on a pyre about half a kilometer away. Old preachers preparing to conduct funeral prayers for the non sisterhood casualties. A shout from an ex trooper at one of the tower heavy bolters has me dashing up the rampart into the gun room, Schaefer close at my heels. What is it? I demand, even before I'm fully through the door. Neverborn? Movement, says the gunner. I recognize Tarek, the soldier from Hades' Hive. She points out the gun slit across the defense lines between the abbey and wastes. About 400 meters. Something following the way we came in. I peer through the embrasure, trying to see what's caught her eye. There could be something, where Tarek said. Might just be a shadow, or it could be something else. I can't feel the prickle of my skin. I'm not ready to rule out something otherworldly just yet. I'd be just typical of my situation if the Warpborn arrived so soon after the Space Marines and Battle Sisters left. The door bangs open, causing me to jolt, banging my head against the inside of the gun window. Mind yourself, says Orska as she ducks to the doorway. I heard the shout. Rubbing my head, I draw back from the embrasure. Perhaps something coming this way, I say, stepping towards the Dune Seer. You still have your magnoculars? She takes the viewing glasses out of her coat. Another Dune Seer family heirloom. Another Dune Seer family heirloom. And hands them over. I return to the window and scan across the defenses again, following the line of rhinos that lead back to where we fought the Neverborn and were rescued. There it is, I say, pointing a finger, spotting a figure clambering across the broken wall of a gun pit. A smaller shape follows at its heel, and I laugh. It's Nazrek. Along with a few wasters for company, I venture out of the abbey to meet the orc about 100 meters from the gate tower. Nazrek sees us coming and sits down on a way marker by the metalled road. Drawing level, I see the orc looks in rough shape. Eyes closed as Grot sets to work with bodkin thick enough to be classed as a weapon, stitching a length of heavy cord around a gaping wound in Nazrek's side. Still alive, I say. The orc opens its eyes, the red reminding me of the inhuman gaze of Sergeant Uhak. Me live too, it replies, lips curling in an approximation of a grin. Need new arm. It lifts the stump, a trickle of blood seeping out of the horrendous wound, shards of bone jutting from the ruptured flesh. I suppress a gag, wondering how Nazrek is even conscious. Never mind calm. Part of the answer comes when Grot pauses in its labors and pulls a fistful of mushrooms packed into a pouch at its belt. It tosses them into the orc's mouth, and Nazareth closes its massive jaw and chews. A contented sigh escapes the orc as its eyes close again. Grot offers up a bright orange toadstool, but I decline with a raised hand. Tempting, but I better not, I tell the small alien. It shrugs, pops from the fungus into its pops the fungus into its mouth and sets to work on I can't believe the warp dogs didn't get you. Nazarek smiles, listless with the effect of the narcotic. Fight too. Run from rest. He chuckles, chest rising, causing Grot to mutter something under its breath as the stitching starts to part. See, silver humans fight. Hide. Then see sky stars and big Gaka ship. Think that Birdman in trouble. Find trail. And here we are. I look at the Abbey and wonder how the sisters will react to an orc. I doubt there's anything the Hospitalers can do for the alien, but Nazar's got a better chance of surviving with us than out here. And, as far as bodyguards go, there's not much better than a giant orc. I wish Nazarek had been at my side when the traitor Astartes had come. Come on, I say, gesturing for the orc to stand up. It opens an eye, and then both, and then heaves itself to its feet. I had sort of forgotten just how massive Nazarek is, but even so, it seems bigger than before. Have you been growing? The alien grunts and lifts a fist from the front of his face. Good fighting. Make Nazarek strong again. It bares its fangs. Not runt scraps. Proper fights. I figure you're going to get even more powerful, my green friend, I say. There's a lot of fighting still to come, whether it's orcs, traitor, Astartes, or Neverborn. Something is going to find us at the Abbey. Just a matter of what and when. I am totally happy with Nazarek leaving and coming back as soon as it's convenient for the storyline. I'm cool with it. I give you permission, Gabthorpe, and I think everyone reading was also hoping the same thing. Just because, yeah, he's cool. He's just cool enough. He has every single time I think, man, this orc is too smart. The orc will immediately explain why the orc is so smart, and I'm okay with that. And there, I guess what I am slow to the table here is there's something happening on Armageddon. I'm still just imagining Armageddon as being something static, but there's something happening on Armageddon which is changing not only the nature of the way the orcs fight, but just the conflict. Yeah, and yeah, everything. The sacrifices come from all the bloodshed, and the bloodshed makes the orcs smarter, but it also makes them dumber because when they get like only the humans can hope. Humans have enough fear, or I guess humans have hope, right? And so when something like a massive horde of demons and a bloodthirster is charging them, their fear will as long as they have hope, they'll have a little bit of fear. They'll be like, no, we're not going to fight this. I want to live at least a bit. And even the men of the Astra Militarum, they have hope, and that. But orcs, what I'm trying to say is orcs do not have hope. They could not hope. Hope is a very human emotion. I think they have bloodlust, and they could like yearn for another battle, and they could want another battle, and I guess they could hope for another battle, but they don't hope for. They hope for violence. They don't really hope for survival quite as much as humans do. So, without basically, I guess the shortest way of saying this is orcs lack the self-preservation required not to retreat from the demonic hordes that would just subsume them. Right now, the demonic hordes, what they can do is it's really quite preposterous. Is they can just aggro the orcs into fighting them, even if the orcs, especially if the orcs are under strength, because at that point they'll just destroy all those orcs, and then that's a ritual. But from what the Salamanders were saying, from what they were saying, it sounds like the Sisters of Battle, their souls are somehow even juicier for the ritual. I feel like there's just a lot happening. I guess that's the way I'll put it. There's just a lot happening right now, and I'm glad Kage and all of them didn't go on that super secret death mission because it would have been preposterous. I can't think of any. I can't think of any chapter anywhere besides like the soul drinkers that would reserve space and logistics and time just to haul like what 30 soldiers. I mean, you could probably fit quite a few soldiers or guardsmen in a drop pod or in a thunderhawk rather, but still, yeah, you could fit a lot of people in a drop pod too, but none of them would be getting out alive. It would just be tomato. Yeah, yeah. No, there was a cartoon about that actually on Dawn of War 2 when the Eldar used the drop. Yeah, the Eldar used the drop pods, and they're like, Captain, our commander sent us soup. Yeah, that was great. That was great. I don't think they'd bring too many soldiers with them, so they didn't. Uh, I find a fold-out camp chair in one of the abandoned cells, and I've set it up on the gate rampart overlooking the road. There's recap in my mug. Nothing stronger to be found, despite pressing old preacher, and I sit there for a few minutes, just listening to the quiet bustle. Nazarek and Grot disappeared to the vehicle cloister as soon as I showed them around the abbey. There's been banging and orcish cursing on and off ever since. Nobody dares investigate yet. Eladia is less than happy at having Xenos scum in her abbey, and both Erasmus and old preacher went pale at the thought. Despite their reservations, none of them was prepared to argue the point at this time while face to face with the massive brute, or the teams of unarmed underhivers and wasters aligned to my cause. For its part, Nazarick said that the Emperor had lots of Daka, and it would die to defend the Emperor's shack. Gra even made an offering, laying a small pile of half-chewed fungus at the feet of a holy statue. A shadow falls over me. It's the Colonel. He's still dressed in his waster coat, cap, and shawl. But from somewhere in the stores, he's procured in a set of Aquila brooches he's fastened to his breast and hat. He also holds a steaming mug, hands and fingerless gloves clasping it to his chest, as he looks over at the expanse of abandoned defenses. Nothing between us and Acheron, or the orcs at the rock fort, he says almost to himself. These people need protection. Didn't drag them out of the hive and across the waste just to leave them to the beasts and hunters, I murmur. Of course, there is little we can do against the full-scale assault of the Warpborn, he adds, glancing at the wound in the sky and back to me. The Abbey provides sanctuary. The Warpborn can't enter. That was the faith of the Battle Sisters. He gives me a long look. Do you really think you are holy enough to drive back the immaterial fiends? I'm basically a living saint, I reply and take a swig of recaf. Everyone round here says as much. There is a good reason why it requires a conclave of cardinals and many noted miracles to declare a man or woman a saint, and not just the word of a single priest. I sit forward, elbows on knees. Why shouldn't I be a living saint? I ask, as much for myself as him. Do you really think I'm just that lucky? That I'm still alive? Would luck have got me out alive from the fire chasm? Or maybe you don't think the Emperor protects. All that shit you spew about saving our souls is just an excuse for you. I do not doubt that the Emperor can extend his will to shape the course of our lives. There are many tales of his doing so or guiding his followers to victory with the imperial tarot. Even so, I will not ascribe any outlandish event as divine intervention, and I refuse to accept that a murdering, treacherous blasphemer like you would be so elevated by his glorious purpose. But what better vessel for his will than one that was broken, but he was mended? I take another swig and then point at Schaefer. You are partially responsible for bringing me into his holy path. What drew you to that world those years ago when you came for me? It was the hand of the Emperor acting through you, setting me on this course. He looks thoughtful for a moment, not dismissing me out of hand. The colonel shakes his head. No, I went to that world because garrisons always get bored, giving the malcontents like you opportunity to show their true colors. I knew I'd find my type of scum. It just happened that you were one of them. How many survivors have there been? I asked suddenly. Except you, I mean. All the missions, all the last chancers. How many people have you got through with life and limb intact? Sane or just alive? Asked the colonel, as plainly as someone might ask if I want my recap with Cynthilact or not. Let's just go with breathing, I say. Let's just go with breathing, I say, not wanting to think too much about the alternatives. A little close to home, some might say. 8, says Schaefer, not including you or me. There have been 8 other last chancers that have survived to take their pardons. 8? I nearly fall out of the chair. Out of thousands? 8? Never failed a mission, the colonel says in defense of his appalling survival rate. He sees my expression and scowls. Do you think we can win wars without people dying? What is it you think the Imperial Guard is for? To protect the realms of the Emperor, to uphold the Imperial will of Terra, I say, quoting from the oath I swore when I was recruited to the Astra Militarum. Remember what Oleanus Pius said about the Emperor? We protect him, and he'll protect us. To die for the Emperor, says the colonel. He leans a little closer, stare fixed on me. An Imperial Guardsman's duty is to die for the Emperor. The Emperor sacrifices all for humanity, and so humanity must sacrifice for him. You will kill, but more importantly, you will die for the Emperor, so that others do not. I look at him, amazed at his forthright confession. I have a bleak view of the universe, but to see the colonel summing it up like that, it puts his idea of a last chance into a different light. That's for sure. Did you think heroes keep the Imperium alive? He continues. Living saints, battle sisters, space marines? It's all very fine when you look at these warriors, each the equal of many soldiers of the Astra Militarum. But it's also their weakness. What can one space marine achieve that 1,000 guardsmen cannot? Think back to your victories, Kage, and tell me, what have you achieved that any other man or woman could not? I thought you had grasped this when you ranted on the wall to that underhiver scum. You are not special. You are simply here. Your role is to die so that others live. And yet, you seem incapable of fulfilling that simple bargain. Saints are martyred. You simply refuse to die. Where is the argument against it? How do you speak against a creed that's so dismissive of individual life and liberty? More to the point, I know he's right. Every damned word of that. Your life can be spent doing many things, Kage, but your death can only be spent once. Tell me a tale of how a living saint sat upon the halls of a battle abbey drinking recaf, while the warriors of the Adeptus Astartes and Adeptus Sororitas took the war to the enemies of the emperor. I didn't shoot. Remind me the time Saint Lithora stayed at the ruins of Hope Station and fed the weak, giving her own plate for others. I am sure she. Saint Lithora died upon the breach of Darkwell, so that the armies of the Emperor could storm the citadel. She knew it was her duty to strike back at those that had broken Hope Station, even though she would not live to see the victory. Look around you, Kage. Does this look like a victory to you? I'm going to say something about people being alive out here rather than dead in the Underhive, but I know that's not going to convince him, and it shouldn't. As many hivers as I've saved, there's a dead waster or battle sister. I mean, the Warpborn and World Eaters didn't attack here because we came. We didn't really achieve anything either. Only the Battle Sisters and the arrival of the Salamanders stopped us all from getting butchered. If I look at the story again from where we are now, seems to me all I did was lead them to a different path of danger. I see you are starting to understand, Kage, the colonel says, voice softening. He looks at me with those ice blue eyes, not with compassion, but with fierce determination. I told you before, you cannot save them all. In fact, you cannot save any of them. Death cannot be cheated. You have lived this lie again and again. Is it wrong to want to live? If you are a farmer or a clerk or a tech menial, you are not. You are a soldier. You must accept that you will die in the Emperor's service, not embrace it, not chase it as a doom, but to take the Emperor's sacrifice into yourself and share the burden. I nod, understanding again what it was he was trying to achieve. Again, because I'd sort of forgotten what it was like to everything before the fire chasm. It's like coming out of the flames washed of all memory, the clarity I had standing on that edge just before I threw myself and Von Strab into our fiery deaths. I turned to look at the people on the walls, the others down in the cloister, going about their displaced lives. But if we're not going to protect this, it's their lives we are shielding, even if the place has changed. No, you are thinking too narrowly, Kage, the colonel straightens, eyes scanning over the abbey and those within. You owe them nothing. A few dozen flakes of ash on the wastes. The Emperor rules countless billions. It is all of them that you serve. Which is better? To wait for the battle to come and fight here, scraping for your last breath for these people, or to find a higher purpose, a greater mission that will defy the plans of the enemy and save thousands or millions. I think back to the things we'd done. It all seemed so small at the time. A reactor going critical, a bullet in an alien's brain, a man throwing himself into a fire with another man. Simple acts, almost impossible to create the circumstances, but so small to finish once we were here. And I never really thought about the consequences beyond staying alive. Wars turned or averted. Like the colonel says, millions of lives saved by a handful of people in a bad place at the right time. So, I can stay here with a las pistol and knife and wait for Warpborn and Oryx to come and kill us. As sure as Olesh getting blown apart by a bolt, I can see it now, the enemy coming to the gate eventually, over my corpse and everyone dying. There's too few of us, and too many of them. I look at the colonel and grit my teeth. The few can protect millions if they do the right thing in the worst place. Something I heard from Afahiva surfaces through my thoughts, and I stand up, tossing the last dregs of recap over the wall. I've got a really bad idea, I tell Schaefer. I would love to hear it, he replies. Wow. Wow, Gav. Wow, Gav. Thank you for that. Thank you for that entire chapter. That entire chapter was a treat. Thank you, Gav. I was just starting to think that now that the colonel's not in charge of a bunch of stuff, his leadership really does make the books fun. I realize that now. I mean, it's useful for Gav because Gav doesn't have to like give us an entire chain of command, which I mean, for me, every battle sister is just that's a battle sister. The the librarian and the sergeant are just different enough, and it's cool. It's just the sergeant because that shows that they're actually following the force organization chart. So the librarian's in charge, but the sergeant's also there, and the librarian wouldn't like. I mean, he could go against the sergeant, but they typically try not to. So that's cool. That represents that. But um, the best thing about a leader is he shelters his or her soldiers from just the chain of command. They don't have to like deal with because like I mean you already have to deal with soldiering things, right? And that's not too much fun. But having to deal with your job and then the burdens of the command that's what the best and that's what Schaefer does, and that really makes it great for me because I don't have to worry about maintaining this like weird chain of command that's behind the scenes. I like that, and then it's good for him because he doesn't have to maintain such a thing or give it development or anything like that. It exists, but it's it's an inquisitor saying some snippy comments or just being an absolute dirtbag like that. The chain of command ends up getting its own plot point instead of this like um, committee. And I guess my delight at returning to just this whole like very direct, very small uh unit composition is just it's so like direct to the point and there's no subterfuge. And I guess it's just what Schaefer and I probably both have the same feeling on that is he's probably wanting to be like leading everything the whole time. Like I guess him holding back this whole time, he was probably like just like yeah, he was probably just like shuddering. Um I don't know. I think I mean I've seen priests hold plasma guns, right? And I'm sure not all priests are like that, but I think probably one of the coolest models, or not models, but just characters or units in the game is the plasma gun priest. Because here's the thing: is the plasma gun will probably just melt his mouth off, or just cook him because he doesn't have armor. But he does have the Rosarius, which gives him like a half chance at living, at surviving anything. So it's just like it's really great because you kind of have to have faith to you kind of have to like have faith in the emperor that the plasma priest isn't just going to cook himself. And the real question is do you instruct your plasma priest to go rapid fire? And if so, he's going to be firing twice as many shots and he'll have twice as much of a chance for him to cook. But maybe that was just the whole point. Maybe the entire point of it was for him to cook himself while simultaneously destroying an enemy space marine or something. So I wouldn't put it past the entire priesthood to even just wander towards the orc with a pistol and try to shoot it. But I would say that maybe those of the Abbey could be convinced that the orc would be like a good defender. He shouldn't have even brought it up. There should have just like been like a plot hole. Like no, I would have been soured about that. Gavthorpe's a man for just facing it head on. But I mean, maybe not the priest, but if I was the sister hospitaller there, I would be so afraid that I would either get the Space Marine sized bolt gun bolt to the face or the Battle Sister sized bolt gun. I would be I wouldn't even be afraid. I'd just be wondering which bolt gun I would be treated to once they get back from their mission. Because having an alien in Abbey, I mean, they wouldn't even be considering the battle. I mean, that one sister, she was like that one sister superior. She was like, yeah, we're just gonna stay here forever and defend this place for like they think about things in terms of doctrines and history because they're trying to like recreate that and that it's that's why they wouldn't allow the orc there because that would just be like that would just everyone there, everyone on the world and perhaps beyond would be like, oh yeah, that's where the orcs are. They hang out there. Yeah. Oh yeah, orc lover. You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want that. But once again, I'm cool. I'm cool with Nazarek. I'm cool with Nazarek coming back. I guess the cool thing about Nazarek is there just really aren't a lot of orc novels. I don't think I've read an orc novel. Are there orc novels? I don't know. So it's fun having an orc around to speak and do things with because they're just monsters. But yeah, I don't think you could do it. I don't think there's enough there. I mean, drive buggy shoot lots of human. Like it would. I don't know. It would just be like caveman speak the entire time. Yeah, it would be all right though. I mean, look, short stories are fantastic. That's a fan. Short story is a fantastic medium for them, but I can't see anything. So yeah, Nazarek is great. It's cool that there just happens to also be a Grot as well. That's great. Nazarek's great. Grot's great, and it's um he's worth it. He's worth it, Gav. We love him. He's worth it, Gav. We love him. The grumble of a generator is lost as a grinder screeches into life, throwing sparks across the dim interior of the workshop. With the colonel behind me, I step through the door to be confronted by an image which may never leave me. Nazarek is leaning over a workbench, the stump of a severed arm locked in an industrial clamp. In the flickering light, I catch a glimpse of rivets holding a metal plate into the alien's shoulder. Three long nails welded into place as defensive plates. Grot stands on the bench, one foot on the lacerated bicep, holding the handle of the grinder and skinny but surprisingly strong fingers. The spinning blade carves into a metal cap, fixed into the stump, pushed into place by Nazarek's other hand. From the metallic stump protrudes the orc's choppa, removed from the hilt and fixed to the stump with bolts. Heavy duty springs burrow into the muscle, quivering as the grinder chews through an outcrop of iron, finishing a zigzag design on a shield like plate covering the artificial elbow. Boss! The orc forgets that the clamp is on and turns and tries to stand, almost ripping the limb out again. Grot tosses the grinder to the floor with a savage little grin and starts unwinding the handle on the vise. But as soon as it's loosened, the orc pulls up the crude bionic, flexing with a metallic creak, springs tightening like fake sinew. Grot springs out with a lamp and shines the light on the new attachment, which Nazrek turns one way and then another, admiring the joint handiwork. I'm no tech adept. It looks more like the underside of a chimera's power plant than any augment I've seen, but it seems to work. Good, it says, lifting the axe like appendage. Oil drips from the fixing plate, spattering the orc's legs. Yeah, looks good, I tell him. How did you know what to do? Reckon must be a mech, the orc says with a grin. It wraps its knuckles on the jagged shaped shield, listening to the clang, with the head cocked to one side. Solid. In the lantern light, I see a mess of staples, rivets, and stitching holding together the orc's torso. They really are frilly layers of There are frilly layers of flesh around the edges, like a mix of scab and fungal growth. The skin is darker, leatherer, leatherier, more leathery, like the orc's whole body, and is responding like the orc's whole body is responding to the injuries by getting tougher. I've got some questions for you. What do you want to know? I ask, keeping my distance while trying not to seem like I'm keeping my distance. I mean, where do you want to go? Follow you, boss. Right. What if I wanted to do something for the Emperor? Fight. Nazareth brings up the arm chopper. Nazareth fight for the Emperor too. I feel the colonel shift next to me, but I keep my attention focused on the orc. And if we had to fight the other orcs for this thing, for the Emperor, Nazareth doesn't reply straight away. I've got no idea what sort of thinking passes for morality or loyalty among the orcs, but judging by what happened in the Underhive, Nazareth's happy fighting orcs just as much as anyone else. I'm not sure it really even cares, just that it gets someone to hit. Bad orcs? I'll be straight, I say. Good and bad don't really come into it anymore. The Warpborn, the Plague Bearers, and Blood Boys, and the like, they don't care about good and bad, orc or human. There's going to be a whole lot more of them coming, and we think we can stop them. Fight the Blood Boys, Nazareth nods. Fight orcs. Fight Warp Boys, yeah. Good, I say. The dark and oppressive presence of the orc is starting to get to me, like I'm in its lair. It's irrational, but I can't shake the feeling. Let's step outside for a bit. Nazareth grunts a few times but doesn't move. Grodd appears out of the back of the workshop, lugging a Battle Sisters bolter and an armful of scrap. It lobs the stuff into the workbench and scrambles up, screeching and gesturing. Nazareth rumbles a few thoughts back, finger protruding through the pile. Ready, boss, says the orc, looming over us. Shaper opens the door, and light feels like a welcome dawn. The polluted air of Armageddon, a fresh breeze compared to the confines of the workshop. I think back to the Underhive and realize I never gasped. I never grasped how rank it was with human and orc habitation. I step outside as the clanging of a hammer starts behind us, resisting the urge to turn and find what Grot is doing. That, I say, looking up. Nazareth follows my gaze and grimaces. Bad, it says. Warp, yeah? Warp, I say. A hole between our world and theirs. While it's open, the Warpborn will keep on coming. Kill the humans, kill all the orcs. Not kill orcs. Not all, Nazareth says. It's not defiance or boasting, as far as I can tell. The orc looks at me and bangs its remaining head against its chest. This world, always green, even if no orcs. Green. I figure Nazarek's talking about the way that once you have an orc infestation, it's almost impossible to eradicate all trace of them. The spores linger, growing into infected orcoid forms, eventually creating a little patch of orcdom that breeds actual orcs and grots. I've seen it in different places, from hive to jungles. The Adeptus Mechanicus probably have a term for it. I think of it more as orcification. I want to talk to you about the green, the big green, that you can feel. I make vague motions with my hands, trying to convey this idea of a psychic realm. Nazarek nods its heavy head, and I continue. You can feel it here? Small green, the orc says, looking a little forlorn. Lots, not green. Blood think. Emperor songs. Messy. Can you feel where the bigger green is? Asks Schaefer. Nazarek looks at the colonel for the first time. It weighs up the answer, perhaps wondering how the colonel fits in everything. Yeah, says Nazarek. The orc looks back towards Acheron, a little way off, the way we arrived. Big green that way. Big green and bad, think. A battle between the orcs and Wartborn, I suggest? Nazarek sort of nods and shrugs, which wasn't the clearest of answers.